Stay tuned to PBS 39 for a special report you won't want to miss, especially if you have school-age children. In the fall, the region was rocked by a string of violent episodes by students. The incidents caught national attention and caused the Lehigh County District Attorney to say, "I don't know what's gotten into these kids." The PBS 39 team partners with the Morning Call for an in-depth report on school violence right now on Focus. Focus is for our community.
Focus showcases the people,
the places, and the issues that matter to you.
Focus on what matters.
You never know what you're going to see when you tune into Focus.
Support for Focus is provided by Univest, Banking, Insurance, Investments, Fellowship Community, Continuing Care with Spirit, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Laura McHugh, broadcasting from the PPL Public Media Center at PBS 39. In this episode, we focus on education and public safety. In the fall, a string of violent incidents involved students from across the Lehigh Valley. In at least 2 incidents, police officers were either attacked or injured. To learn more about what's being done as a result, we've assembled a panel of educators, school board members, and law enforcement officials. But first, here's Focus reporter Brittany Garzillo with a recap. Brittany?
Laura, recent episodes of school violence have occurred across the Lehigh Valley and have even caught national attention. Before we break down possible solutions to the problem, here's a recap of some of the region's most recent incidents and a warning, especially to parents. Some of the video contains violent content.
Lehigh Valley schools are making headlines. In the fall of 2015, area schools experienced a string of violent episodes by students. Morning Call reporter Jacqueline Palachko documented their details. Cell phone video captured an incident on October 29, 2015, when 4 Allentown police officers were injured attempting to break up a brawl blocks away from William Allen High School in Allentown. A week later, numerous fights broke out throughout the day at Trexler Middle School in Allentown, causing the school to go into lockdown.
Teachers said that students were yelling down hallways, banging on lockers, and one teacher actually said that it sounded as if a riot was happening.
The next day, an incident occurred during a pep rally at Deer High School in Allentown. Incidents occurred across the Lehigh Valley. On November 12, 2015, an incident occurred at Liberty High School in Bethlehem.
At Liberty High, 9 students were arrested for a fight that happened there.
The same day, a student at the Executive Education Academy Charter School in Allentown allegedly punched a school bus driver. A day later, 7 teenagers from the Medical Academy Charter School in Catasauqua were arrested for allegedly jumping an Allentown police officer trying to break up a fight. In December of 2015, 8 Allentown School District students were arrested for allegedly assaulting another student in a fight that occurred outside Building 21. Also that month, 2 students from Jackson Building, an alternative education school for middle school students in Allentown, were charged with fighting. And in March of 2016,
a Central Elementary student brought a gun to school. It was an unloaded gun, but security and administrators still took care of that incident.
According to Palachko, school officials, teachers, and education experts say a host of factors have created this atmosphere of violence, including budget restraints.
Since 2011, the Allentown School District has lost 450 positions, and that's led to a lot of class sizes growing to about 30 students in a class. Some parents are saying that they're afraid to send their kids to school these days in Allentown, and a lot of people that are not parents are saying that they think that parents should be involved more, and we can't just be blaming the district for issues.
And Palachko reports an increasing public outcry to address the ongoing outbursts. With the Morning Call's Jacqueline Palachko, I'm Brittany Garzillo reporting.
Thank you, Brittany. We continue the discussion now with Allentown School District Superintendent Dr. Russ Maya, Allentown School Board member Cece Gerlach, Lehigh University Education Professor George White, Jose Rosado, the CEO of Medical Academy Charter School in Catasauqua, and Sergeant Glenn Granitz from the Youth and Community Services Division of the Allentown Police Department. Dr. Mayo, I understand you can only speak about the Allentown School District, but how do the number of incidents in the 2015-16 school year compare to previous years?
Well, I think you have to look at multiple years, actually, Laura. There's been an increase in the number of incidents over the years, but more importantly, I think these incidents have become more pronounced and more violent, probably. Certainly 2015 in the fall was much more violent and directed toward authority, actually, rather than student on student. Very often in the past, it's been student on student.
Sergeant Granitz, have you been keeping track of juvenile crime within the Allentown area, and is that consistent with what the school districts are seeing?
It is consistent with what the school district is seeing. I think it is fair to say and accurate that over the last 5 years there has been a steady decline in juvenile arrests overall, particular to the city of Allentown. And I think that can be attributed to a number of factors.
Yeah, and I would add that if you look at the data over time from the mid-1990s through the data that we have up to 2014, that decline has gone in terms of student violence or non-lethal violence on students has dropped significantly, according to the World Health Organization and to statistics by the Department of Justice, from a high of about 19% in the 1993-94 academic year to between 6 and 7% in the 2013-2014 academic year.
What are some of the root causes, Dr. White, of violence among juveniles, but specifically as it relates to schools?
Yeah. There are a number of reasons that we find over the years that have had an impact on student violence. And by the way, this is historic. So the first is there's a direct correlation between poverty and student violence. Secondly, there's a strong relationship between students feeling disconnected from their community, whether that's school community or their community at large, with student violence. And then I think the third piece is unemployment. Unemployment by families, but more importantly, in this day and age, unemployment by students. If students are not having the opportunity to get a job while they're in upper middle school or high school, then what happens is they don't feel like they have any control over their lives, and their education begins to lose meaning to them. And I think those are probably three core reasons.
Jose, I see you shaking your head.
Yes, I think unfortunately a lot of young people today are just very angry. And I think part of the reason that young people today are angry is because they've experienced failure on multiple levels. They've experienced failure in their own households, whether it's poverty, parental substance abuse, psychological abuse, neglect. They walk out their front door and they experience failure in the community, gangs, violence, drugs, the entertainment industry. All of those things emphasize a sense of failure. And many of these kids walk into our schools with those two strikes already against them, and they're pushing for that third strike. You know, people talk about this all the time, self-fulfilling prophecy. And they're pushing for that third strike, and oftentimes educators and other people in positions of authority respond to the walk, the talk, you know, that facade that kids are putting on, and oftentimes students start to feel that sense of failure within the school. And what they do oftentimes is what I call taking on a being good at being bad lifestyle. Because I really believe that status and recognition is important to young people just as it is to any of us here. And if students cannot get status and recognition for positive things, whether it's academics, athletics, the arts, then they're going to seek that status and recognition by being good at being bad. And I think that that's something that we really need to take some thought to and consideration.
I hope we can come back to that idea of recognition later in the program. Cece, I saw you shaking, or I should say nodding your head.
Yes.
In agreement.
I think what everyone here has alluded to is the trauma that a lot of our young people have experienced when they are in their communities and they are at home, and that gets brought into the classroom. So that by the time they walk into the classroom, they've already been through a lot of obstacles that that teacher then has to somehow help that child to overcome those obstacles. And there are programs and different ways of speaking with young people to kind of de-escalate situations before they become violent. And I mean, just last night we had a school board meeting where that was one of the main topics of conversation, and I'm sure that will come up later as we continue about what can we actually do to help solve this situation?
And actually, that's a great question. We in our studio audience today have students from Nazareth Area High School as well as Allentown Area Middle Schools. And one of the questions that came from a student today is, what is being done to prevent school violence and make our schools a safer place? I think everybody at the table can add something to that conversation, but Dr. Maya, we'll begin with you.
Well, referring back to what Cece was saying earlier, we had a presentation last night. We're looking seriously at incidents as well as the needs of our kids, particularly from a mental health point of view. And one of the things we're looking at is a package of all of our social emotional efforts that we make. For example, we have a PATHS program for our elementary kids. We have a Second Step program for our middle school kids. These are all programs to help kids learn how to participate in a community and affiliate in a positive sense, and be good at being good rather than bad, to use Jose's expression. And we're having to seriously pursue this to the point that we even recommended an increase in a position last night to our board to coordinate these efforts because it's become so pronounced. But we have partnerships with communities and schools. We have a number of partnerships with the hospitals. We have a lot of community involvement for our kids, but they come out of very difficult situations that they did not choose to be born into, frankly, and that's unfortunate because of the challenges they deal with.
Cece, will you support that proposal?
Yeah. I definitely support that. One area I think that we could improve on more is our outreach to the community, meaning being more responsive to the needs of the individual communities, such as having teacher conferences maybe in the community setting versus the school setting. So there is more that we can do. But I think this is a great first step, and I'm hoping that this new position, it will be someone who can possibly start to coordinate some of those next steps where we can go even further than where we've been going.
Dr. White, as an expert on urban education and running the Lehigh University Center on Urban Education, what are the best practices out there that are universally accepted or growing in recognition to prevent violence?
Right. So I think the prevention is the key, and being able to build partnerships with a variety of community agencies. And bottom line is, what we have to do is to provide opportunities where students feel valued and respected, and that they build a trust with their systems, whatever those systems are, the church, the school, the police, the community. All of those have to work together. And unfortunately, during these most recent times of declining financial resources, those bonds between those organizations have been frayed to some extent. When you take 400 individuals, professionals out of the buildings, and you increase class size with pre and early adolescence, and we've all been there, we've all been that age where everything has to center on me and I'm important, and we don't have the opportunity to provide that relational time for kids, we start to see those experiences. And when the 2008 financial crisis hit, Bethlehem had to eliminate their team teaching for their middle schools. And the school was smart at that point. They tracked the incidence of behavioral change over time, over the next 2 years, and came back to the school board and came back to the community and basically said, here's what happens when you take away those relational opportunities, and kids start to suffer. So they put them back in. So the more we can do to build those partnerships and the relationships with all of the organizations, no one should be excluded.
Sergeant Granitz, I saw you nodding your head in agreement. Is that?
Absolutely. I think one focus that the school district, the Allentown Police Department, even countywide has shared is both the focus on the youth, the mental health, and the first aid dealing with their trauma. I know we've sent all of our officers that interact with our youth, and now we're getting out to the rank and file. And just 2 weeks ago, there was a forum known as the Youth and Law Enforcement Curriculum, which kicked off in Center City, Allentown, which is a wonderful event that brings a number of students, law enforcement, and the professionals in and around our schools together. And they literally got to spend everything from breakfast to lunch to dinner together and had very frank discussions on these topics. And it really gives the officers who are responding to these situations a unique way of communicating and understanding maybe where some of these teenagers and younger people are coming from.
Jose, what's being done at the Medical Academy Charter School to prevent future incidents?
Well, I think one of the things that we really need to focus on, and that was a topic of a conversation right now, and I think it's what we're focusing on at the Medical Academy Charter School, is that we've got to address the entire student, the whole student. And most schools do a very good job at addressing the academic needs and deficiencies of students. But educators have got to understand that we're called on to do much more than that today. We have to address the social, emotional, psychological, and personal needs and deficiencies of students. And being that we are the Medical Academy Charter School, we look at that social health of our students. And with that in mind, we try to address all of the needs, not just their academic needs and deficiencies, but those other needs and deficiencies that need to be addressed so that students are in the right frame of mind and ready to learn when they're in the classroom.
Moving the discussion from prevention to response when incidents do occur, I wanted to pose a question to you, Dr. Mayo. In a November statement, you wrote that the district was going to identify students in each school and assess where they should be in terms of education, even suggesting possible alternative placement for those students. What's been the result of that assessment?
Well, we have placed some students there. It drew a lot of attention to the challenges that our principals had in each of the buildings. But I think it's important to also note in these situations, we can't just arbitrarily go look at students and then try to shift them to some other program, particularly if they're special education needs. And the kids have rights, everybody has rights. We want to be as fair as we possibly can be. So we have evaluated that. We've moved on those particular situations that we had. We've looked at our procedures again to make sure we're meeting the needs of kids and doing everything we can in the regular program before we would consider an alternative placement for them. So in the case of those schools, we reviewed those incidents and individuals. We also brought the principals in, discussed them with them. We put plans in place, individual plans for those kids in place, and some of them were moved to alternative education.
In Bethlehem, Superintendent Dr. Joseph Roy stresses that he also does not see an overall increase in school violence in the district, but that 3 of the students involved in the fight at Liberty High School have since been expelled. You said some of the students have been placed in alternative placement in Allentown, some of the students who were involved. Is that correct?
Yes, and some have been expelled also.
The students who were involved in the fight in Allentown at the Medical Academy Charter School, where are they today?
One of those students was placed in a juvenile facility through juvenile probation, and the other 6 students that were involved have returned to the school. This incident that you speak of occurred in the community, and I think it's important to understand where the school's jurisdiction ends and when it becomes a community event. Not that we did not want to address the incident, the fight, and we certainly did. But I think we had to do it as a school addressing the needs of those students as opposed to looking at it from a punitive perspective, because obviously the police were involved with that, juvenile probation was involved with that. So in that respect, we felt that it was appropriate for the police and the juvenile system to address it, but then we would also address the needs of those students and the concerns that we had for not only their safety, but everyone else's safety at the school.
Well, to get to that point, in one of the incidents, which did not take place or involve students from either Allentown School District or the Medical Academy Charter School, the Morning Call reported that one of the students who was involved was an adult and was charged with a felony. That student had previously pleaded guilty to charges of disorderly conduct and harassment. So I guess my question is, how typical is it for your schools to have students with a record? Dr. Mayo and Dr. Rosado, and then I have a follow-up for Dr. White.
I don't think we can say it's typical, but I can tell you that we do occasionally have students, and we again have plans to deal with them. We also consider whether or not they fit into the age group, population, et cetera, that we're dealing with at the particular school. Sometimes they begin in an alternative program depending on what kind of program they're coming from in the juvenile system. But we look at these very carefully. But they do exist within the system.
Mm-hmm. Jose?
I think it's important to understand what resources that student and his or her family are involved with. As Dr. White was talking about before, whether it's the church, whether it's a mental health facility, whether it's juvenile probation, look to see what services are in place. Oftentimes there may not be services in place, and the school then has to initiate those particular services, again, whether it's mental health, drug and alcohol, what have you. If the student happens to be on probation and has a past history, that makes things a little bit easier because probation's already involved. But I think it's really important just to look at what resources are available, and as a school try to make sure that we're hooking up that student and that family to the appropriate resources to provide the support that that family needs. Because what we don't want is just to see the cycle continue over and over. That young man or that young lady eventually is going to be a parent, and they're going to parent the way they know how to parent. And I think if they don't have the benefit of certain resources when they were experiencing that particular crisis, we're going to see it over and over and over again. And that's the mindset that I really try to come from, addressing that particular individual student, but also with the mindset that we need to break some cycles here and provide that particular student some resources to be able to address those issues.
Dr. White, what are the best practices to balance one student's right to education with the right to safety in school for students and teachers?
Yeah, you always need to lead on the side of safety for the whole group. However, the school administrators' hands to some extent are tied in terms of time and removing students. Let me go back just for a second, however, and say what Jose just mentioned in terms of providing supports. We talk about always providing supports to the student, whether the student who's in trouble or not. But there are some other areas. One that we've found to be very successful is that you begin to engage the families at an earlier and earlier stage in the process. The other thing that we find is that really is working, and their international headquarters are located right in Bethlehem, and that is the restorative practice process, where kids who are offending learn to take responsibility for their experience and learn to understand the impact that it has on other individuals and on systems. And we're seeing that the recidivism rate for kids who are participating in those kinds of programs with coaching and mentoring, the recidivism rate goes substantially down for kids coming back to the school again and again, or to the community again and again. So we got to break that cycle, I agree. Engaging families and training families, providing supports to families on helping them parent more effectively, and then providing students, the offenders, early on. These kids don't just go out for one day and be perfect and then the next day go out and create a major crime. There are little steps along the way, and breaking that cycle early helps reduce the potential that those students will get to the more severe, more violent types of actions.
We're nearly out of time, but I want to make sure everybody has a chance to address what the next steps are. Anything else you'd like to add? Dr. Mayo?
I just think it's very important to go back to the fundamentals, and that is relationships and how those relationships are conducted both among and between faculty, staff, administration, and the genuine concern for our kids. We can have all kinds of programs, we can have all kinds of things in place to deal with the kids, but we have to actually care about the kids, we have to love the kids, and we have to be patient with those kids and be willing to listen to what they have to say.
Cece?
I think we need to amp up our efforts at the early ages in the elementary school students. I've spoken with teachers who can identify. You know, when you're in the classroom, when you're in that kindergarten class, you can kind of start to pick out the kids who may be a bit of a handful when they get older. So I think early intervention, getting them when they're young with the social emotional help that they do need, but then also, as much as it is the school's responsibilities, it's the communities as well. We have so many people in the neighborhoods who could serve as mentors and serve in our schools. So we have to allow them in our schools, open up our schools, so that the people who want to help mentor our children can come in and sit down with a young man, a young lady for an hour or so, and that young person can then have a positive role model in their life, which many of them do not.
Dr. White.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that. We need to provide coordinated efforts. It's not school and or community, it's school and community working together. And in many communities that have had successful ventures in this area, there is a group of individuals who pull everyone together. So it's a hospital, it's the churches, and it is tied directly to mentoring. There is a strong mentoring component here so that kids learn early on that people do care about them. So it's trust in the community, trust with the community, and the ability to let students know that they're going to be held accountable for their actions and their behaviors, but they also have resources to help them when they need them.
Jose.
For me, it starts with the belief that people are born good. I don't think that there's any young child, Cece was talking about elementary age students, you approach those young children at the age of 5, 6, 7 years old and ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? They're going to tell you doctor, lawyer, astronaut, all of these really neat things. But you leave that elementary school and go into a middle school or high school and you ask those young people, where do you anticipate being in 5 years? There's just such a difference there. Some of those kids might tell you, I don't know if I'll be alive in 5 years. I don't know if I even want to be alive in 5 years. So we have to look at what's happening, those life experiences. Because, again, I believe that people are born good. But those life experiences, whether it's relationships in their home, relationships in the communities, relationships in our schools, and I think that the numbers, are very clear. When we look at mass incarceration in this country, the school-to-prison pipeline, what's happening? We could, discuss or debate, nurture versus nature. But I just want to hold on to the belief that people are born good and their life experiences, unfortunately, many of these students that we're talking about, negative life experiences, lead them into these types of behaviors, antisocial and violent behaviors. And we need to address those types of situations and what resources we have in place to break those cycles.
Sergeant Granitz.
I think in Allentown, and fortunately thanks with our communication with the school district and thanks to Chief Morris putting us out there, we've started having a philosophy of getting these youngsters at elementary and middle schools and up to the high schools to meet the police officers in a good setting the first time, in a community conversation, at a basketball game, at after-school events. We just had one yesterday. We started a brand new middle school program, which we call the LIFE program, which is Living with Integrity for Future Excellence, which we're very proud of. And getting to know these kids and attending their events and being there when they're Student of the Month or being there when they have a bad day and getting to know them by first name before they're getting arrested, that is the difference, and we think we'll see the payoff down the road.
Well, thank you very much, all of you, for joining us for this PBS 39 Morning Call special report. We'll see you next week. Until then, remember to focus on what matters.
Whatever your party plans, from weddings to corporate functions, backyard parties to festivals, Action Party Rentals event planners and showroom can help make your event fun. We help people get together. 620 Union Boulevard in Allentown.